We now return to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Before we begin today, I have a brief announcement. As with the closed trial 10 years ago, some astonishing facts have come to light in these proceedings. The revelation that the well-known Reaper is actually an organization illegally executing its own brand of justice, and the discovery that a respected yard inspector was at its heart until he himself perished in an assassination plot. Well, I say to all members of the judiciary here present on this occasion that we will stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth behind these disturbing findings. Counsels, we will undertake this trial with the resolve to pursue the truth to the bitter end. Resolve. Yes, that's my intention. My lord, if I may inquire, the defendant may speak. On what grounds is Cosmo permitted to continue in his role as prosecutor? He has admitted to colluding with the victim in the plot to assassinate an innocent man. He shouldn't be enjoying the privilege of freedom, let alone be leading the prosecution. I submitted a written petition to Lord Strongheart, requesting that judgment of my transgressions be delayed by 1 day. You did what? I feel like this is still highly unethical. In today's proceedings, I intend to expose everything. My whole life for the last 10 years has all been leading up to this 1 day, how cliché, Kazuma. Whatever the outcome of this trial, I give my word that I will accept whatever punishment is deemed appropriate, however severe. And I suggest you prepare yourself for the same, Reaper. Kazuma is still bristling with hostility today. I get the distinct impression we're heading into very dangerous territory. Is that really even Kazuma-sama standing before us? As an extreme exception to normal practices, I have granted this prosecutor's request. The defense finds this acceptable, I presume. Must we? Yes, my lord. In that case, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby declare this court to be in session again. We resume the closed hearing. Beric Van Zeeks. The defense is ready, my lord. The prosecution is more than ready. Very well, then. This preamble has taken long enough. Prosecutor Osoge, begin. As you wish, my lord. The prosecution calls the first witness to the stand. Bring Seishiro Jigoku into the courtroom. At last, then, we've reached the final battle. He's putting literally everything on the line now in order to get to the truth. Come on, Ryunosuke, it's time for that steely resolve, because this is going to test it to the limit. It's not really reassuring. That makes me feel like there's going to be a lot of bullshit behind some of the answers to all of this. Witness, state your name and occupation for the court. So it was you who issued this, was it? Your subpoena? I did what was necessary. Well, look what the young man has become. I didn't think I'd see the day when you'd take that tone with me, I must say. The witness will ensure his responses are pertinent to the questions asked. My name is Seishiro Jigoku, a Supreme Court judge from the Empire of Japan. 16 years ago, this man came to London as a visiting student. 6 years later, he returned to Japan. As well as presiding over the Supreme Court, he is also currently Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs. I am, of course, fully aware of Mr. Jigoku and his preeminent roles. I invited him personally to the International Forensic Science Symposium as a representative of his country. I hear he also played a key role in the conclusion of the Anglo-Japanese Treaty of Friendship and Navigation. It was a great honor to be involved in the negotiations. I put my all into that treaty. Judge Jigoku, I must ask, Well, I never. Fancy the young murdering student turning up here in all places. You acquitted me yourself, and now I'm a practicing defense lawyer. Yes, why... Did we not meet together in the hotel lobby? Does he not know the story? What is this? Yes, and full of self-importance like your friend across the courtroom, I see. You came here to London by invitation to the International Forensic Science Symposium. Then, without informing anyone of your plans, you took flight to France. Took flight? I'd have to object to that turn of phrase. And explain yourself. What exactly were the circumstances? Are we not going to do like an examination or a testimony thing? A normal cross-examination? Well, I was somewhat expecting this, and I'm sorry to say. I decline to comment. What? Leaving the country prematurely when I was an invited guest may be questionable etiquette, but my decision is unrelated to this case. I can't be bound to testify. Unrelated, you say? I appreciate that a respected police inspector has been killed, for which I offer my condolences. However, being an alien, I'd obviously never met the man, nor do I know the first thing about him. As such, I'm in no position to testify. It's as simple as that. So you would run from all this? I beg your pardon. This case is more far-reaching than the murder of Inspector Gregson. It has ties to another murder, a case that was tried in Japan almost a year ago now. A year ago in Japan. Murder of Dr. John H. Wilson, you mean? That's right. And you, Judge Jigoku, are at the heart of both cases. The defense has evidence to prove it. Well, Ryunosuke, I see from the look in your eyes that you are resolved to carry this through to the very end, too. Let's see your evidence, then. What proof do you have that Seishiro Jigoku is involved in this case? It would be this, yeah? Would it? Well, I mean... Wait a minute. Can we open this up? Did we never open this up? We did. Christ, we got a lot of evidence, don't we? It would have to be this. I mean, we were just talking about it. And this ties the Asashin into Hosonaga. Gotta be that. This is a telegram detailing a communication sent between Britain and Japan approximately 1 year ago. The communication contained 4 names: Kyosogi, A. Shin, T. Gregson, and J. Wilson. You little... Where did you get that? In Tokyo. From your office, Judge Jigoku. What? How on earth did you... What's this all about? Why is my name on that list? This list of 4 names follows a certain pattern. T. Gregson and J. Wilson are the names of victims. K. Asogi and A. Shin are the names of assassins. Did we ever learn the name of Kazuma's father? It's not Kazuma, I'm willing to bet. Wait a minute, where's the autopsy report? That's for Gregson. Where's the autopsy of the professor? Yeah, the professor. Victim of the professor's final... Genshin. Well, I mean... The K's given diacriticals become G's, but I don't think that's a mix-up there. Names would be written in kanji and they wouldn't be like that. It's the only thing I could think of, though. Oh. Although Kazuma did admit that he was going there for a target, yeah? A year ago in Tokyo, Dr. John H. Wilson's life was taken in a Western-style restaurant in the capital. God, it actually feels like it's been a year since we played that mission. The culprit was found to be a visiting student who went by the name of Giselle Brett, but her real name was Asashin, a professional killer sent on a mission to kill from Great Britain. A. Shin and her victim, J. Wilson. And the murder that just took place here in London was the counterpart to that crime, an assassin sent from Japan, also a visiting student, Kazuma Asogi, whose victim was the British police inspector Tobias Gregson. K. Asogi and T. Gregson. Thank you, Susato, you're really a pillar to this whole thing. One assassin from each country to kill a target residing in the other. What exactly is the defense suggesting? These 2 cases of murder, one that took place in Britain and one in Japan, were masterminded by a pair of individuals from each country as a form of assassin exchange, and the telegram the defense has acquired is proof of this international contract to kill. What? Given that I'm willing to bet one was the guy in the dock and the other guy is the one in the judge's chair, I'm willing to bet this goes nowhere in the end. The telegram was found in your office, Judge Jigoku. In other words, the mastermind in Japan was you. Given that he's also head of the foreign affairs, I would imagine yes. Judge Jigoku, what's this all about? And you, Kazuma, you lied. During yesterday's proceedings, you acknowledged that you'd accepted the assassination mission. But the mark wasn't Judge Jigoku at all. It was T. Gregson, Detective Inspector of Scotland Yard, as shown by the name on the killing contract. Very impressive, Ryunosuke. But actually, I didn't lie. The name of the target I was ordered to kill never passed my lips yesterday. The idea that Seishiro Jigoku was the mark came entirely from you. Deliberately avoided saying a name? The defense claims these 4 names indicate some sort of international assassin exchange. I'm sure I speak for all present when I say that the very idea seems utterly absurd. Well, Mr. Jigoku, what do you have to say for yourself? Given that he's in on it, I mean this whole thing is corrupt. His silence only proves his guilt. I mean, that's a jump there, Naruhodo. There's another very important point that this new development brings to light. There's now a distinct possibility that the scene of Inspector Gregson's actual murder was in the witness's cabin aboard the SS Grouse. Judge Jigoku, you have to testify now. To refuse would put you in contempt of court. There's no need for quite such a vicious stare, young man. Very well, then. As a parting gift to you all, I'll tell you everything I know. It seems this Japanese gentleman has information that the court must hear about the alleged assassin exchange and the events of the night of the 31st of October. Present your formal testimony now. As you wish, my lord. It's true that Kazuma Asogi was assigned the assassination mission 1 year ago now. The target was Inspector T. Gregson. That was a condition of the British study tour. However, in the end, something happened that meant the young man was unable to carry out his mission. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on duty outside my cabin at all times. If there'd been a shot fired, the crewman would have heard it, so clearly I can't be involved. Nobody mentioned the shot, sir. Why is that just popping in? So you admit it then. As this communication suggests, there really was an assassin... Getting an excess of spit in my mouth with all these sibilant syllables. An assassin exchange arrangement between Britain and Japan. A political endeavor at the highest levels, not something I can discuss here. To use such a worthy practice as foreign study to coerce somebody to commit murder. That's the most appalling thing I've ever heard. Appalling? Well, it's easy to judge. Pardon? Asogi had a reason for taking his sword to that British inspector, you know. What? Which is why he accepted the mission in the first place. Isn't that right, Counsel? Kazuma-sama. Judge Chigoku, if you are the mastermind behind this operation in Japan, then tell the court the identity of your counterpart in Britain. I'm not obliged to divulge that information. As I said yesterday, I've killed nobody. I freely admit that I accepted the mission, but on the night the plan was to be executed, I backed out. In short, this assassin exchange that the defense has identified is unrelated to the events of this case. The crucial point is this. Your police inspector can't have perished aboard that steamship in Dunkirk, because if he'd been shot in the cabin, it's inconceivable that a member of the crew wouldn't have heard it. That's right. Gregson was killed after returning to London in the room on Fresno Street. And the perpetrator of the crime was the Reaper, Barak van Zieks. The prosecution's accusation remains unchanged. To think that a seemingly innocent foreign exchange program was a facade for such Machiavellian dealings, wow. Wow. Clearly, it's a plot only a government minister and high-ranking judge such as the witness could hope to execute. Well, I seem to recall that it was someone on the British side who controlled everything. See, I told you. It's taking a passive-aggressive snipe there at Strongheart. Be that as it may, it is not the place of this court to pursue this villainous assassination exchange plot. We are concerned only with the intangible events pertaining to the murder of Inspector Gregson. Is the defense clear on that point, counsel? Yes, my lord. I'll keep that in mind as I cross-examine the witness.
Hold it!
A year ago, when Kazuma was still in Japan then. Correct. It was at the examination center for applicants for the study tour that I approached him. I'll never forget it. I remember exactly what you said. You just came out and asked me forthright if I'd consider traveling to Britain on an assassination mission. Surely not. I thought it was a joke at first, of course, but then it was made clear to me that if I didn't accept, I wouldn't be considered for the study tour. So you agreed to it just for that? I mean, I know how much you wanted to study in England, but assassination? The Empire of Japan had accepted a proposal from the British Empire at the time. An agreement to send a student from each country to the others to deepen cultural understanding and friendship. But behind the scenes, the chosen students were to be given assassination missions. I had no choice but to accept the proposal that originated from my British counterpart. Why? Why didn't you expose the plot there and then? Because you don't know what's about to come in Japanese history, Susato, that's why. Britain acknowledges no part in these alleged misbegotten dealings. I advise you not to make spurious allegations, Foreign Minister Jigoku. As a witness, I am bound to tell the truth, my lord. Anyway, I picked Asogi and explained the details of the plan to him. The target was Gregson.
Hold it!
Why Kazuma? Why did you pick him as the assassin? He was the most capable of all the applicants, and in addition, I knew his desire to travel to Britain was very strong. In fact, it was almost more than a desire. It was his whole purpose in life. Yes, as his best friend, I can certainly attest to that. The way he threw himself into his studies, the way he pursued becoming qualified as a lawyer. It only took him about a month. I mean, it was all ultimately for one single goal of being accepted on a study tour to Britain. And of course, we know the reason behind that. He was determined to find out for himself the truth about his father, Kinshin Asogi. There's nothing I wouldn't have done to get here. Be that agreeing to assume the role of an assassin, or betraying people's trust. Well, you certainly did a fine job of betraying mine, Asogi. But why was Inspector Gregson the target? I have no idea. Those were the orders from Britain. I was in no position to question them. I have no idea, really. I find that hard to believe. Oh, do you? Judge Chikoku was once a visiting student here in Britain himself, of course. Perhaps he has some connection with Inspector Gregson from that time. The defense really ought to catch up. With what? With the fact that the assassin exchange was absolutely nothing to do with the case under scrutiny here. What do we know about Gregson and involvement in the professor case? He would have known, he would have been there for this, he would have been involved with the death of Clint. Did we? Oh, yes. Yes, we did do that. Turns out it's a receiver in there. Yes, I've already admitted to recruiting Asogi. However, in the end, something happened.
Hold it!
I presume you're referring to the incident that occurred during Kazuma's passage to Britain in January. The awful tragedy that took place on the steamship. Word arrived at the ministry some 2 weeks after the ship's departure from our shores. The visiting student had been killed, but his body had somehow gone missing in Hong Kong. The news was wired to me from a detective I'd placed on the ship to accompany the assassin. Obviously, Kazuma didn't actually die at all. But he did lose his memory, including all details about his special mission. How convenient. Did you not consider dispatching another assassin at that point? That wasn't possible, simply because that black-clad young student over there had already put himself forward as Asogi's replacement, and there was no way to stop him from reaching Britain. My hands were completely tied, so Mr. Sholmes' strategy worked perfectly. He predicted everything that would happen. Months later, my memory returned, and I'd never intended to go through with the assassination mission anyway. So you were playing me right from the outset, were you? Is that it? I'd sooner be guilty of that crime than taking someone else's life. This doesn't explain the chip of the sword that's in the trunk, though. I was prepared to do whatever I had to in order to get myself here to Britain. I mean, seriously, we seem to have completely glossed over that. Like, how the fuck did that get inside the chest there? We didn't get over that at all. This line of questioning has gone on long enough. All the court should be concerned about in the testimony given by this witness are details relating to his relationship with Inspector Gregson and the victim's murder. In that case, as I've already made quite clear, I had no connection to the man or his death, and you have some means of substantiating this plea. On the evening in question, a member of the crew was on duty outside my cabin at all times. Outside your cabin in the first-class area of the grouse, you mean? Yes, that's right. At least because there was a murder of a student passenger earlier in the year, I imagine, but not on that ship. The liner operators have taken to posting a crewman outside every first-class cabin door. Yes, protect the first-class people. I can confirm the presence of the crewman guard myself. What do you mean? Because I accompanied Inspector Gregson to Dunkirk that night, I witnessed it with my own eyes. There was a well-built crewman standing guard directly in front of the door to the witness's cabin. At that particular time, of course, I'd gone to the ship's dining room for dinner. The inspector and I asked the crewman to allow us into the cabin while we waited for Judge Chigoku's return. I suppose Inspector Gregson was there in his capacity as the Reaper. He was intending to take the witness's life. Exactly. As I have said numerous times now, I had no intention of killing anyone. So the crewman led two potential assassins into the cabin he was supposed to be guarding. Not the most convincing of sentries, really. In truth, those were my thoughts too. But anyway, I stayed to talk with Inspector Gregson for a short while, and then I left him there and made my way off the ship alone. Was the guard still at the door when you went? Yes, he glared at me as I walked past. You see, that proves it. If there'd been a shot fired, the crewman would have heard it, so clearly I can't be involved. Crewman who was standing directly outside your cabin door, you mean? That's right. A muscular man with a permanent grim expression on his face. He didn't once move from that spot. To be honest, I thought he was a miserable fellow. But, as it happens, he's a vital witness now. There's no doubt that Gregson was killed by a gunshot, and it's inconceivable that a crewman standing just outside the cabin door wouldn't have heard that. But wait, what about the ship's enormous steam engines? The noise of them could have drowned out the sound of the gun being fired. Sadly, young judicial assistant, that won't wash. You will recall that my cabin was in the first-class area of the ship, which is also, of course, the quietest. Don't imagine for a moment that it's anything like steerage where the judicial assistants go. I didn't mean... But a hole like that made by a bullet was found in your cabin, Judge Chigoku. That's compelling evidence that a gun was fired in there. What's that? A bullet hole? Oh yes, you're talking about what the detective uncovered in the wall yesterday, I presume. It was obviously a rotten panel eaten out by woodworm. No doubt he didn't find an actual bullet. It's the hole in this argument. Sadly, I was unable to arrange for the crewman to be brought back to Britain with me. But obviously, if a gun had been fired in my cabin on the night in question, as the defense implies, I would have been arrested on the spot and would never have made it to Britain in the first place. Very true. The witness's logic is sound. Since no gunshot was heard from the witness's cabin on the night in question, we must assume that the witness is telling the truth. I'm glad you've seen sense, my lord. I know Kazuma's already admitted to taking on this incredible assassination plot, but even so, hearing it confirmed by somebody else is still a real shock. It's unforgivable. Using Kazuma-sama's feelings to manipulate him into agreeing to such a despicable plan. But I think Kazuma manipulated Judge Jigoku, too. He's completely double-crossed him. Dear, it's hard not to see that as a stroke of brilliance on Kazuma-sama's part. I don't know, do we really believe he's that innocent? One way or another, though, Gregson ended up dead. I really think that the murder must have happened aboard that steamship. So, you mean Judge Jigoku must be lying? I know I shouldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment, but you must destroy him, Mr. Naruhodo. It's a bit severe from her. Alright. I mean, so like this whole thing, right? The crewman would have heard it. I mean, there's a very easily trippable alarm bell that we ourselves managed to make happen. And we know that somebody, I mean, he said he left, right? Kazuma said he left. So he could have been outside, tripped the alarm, the guy would have been gone, and then the shot would have happened. I don't know what we have here, though, that could be... Following departure from the port of Dunkirk, all crew members will be required to assemble on the main deck in order to review evacuation procedures. The drill will take 20 minutes. Now there you go, he could have been gone in 20 minutes.
Objection!
Yes, as the court has heard, there was a crewman posted outside Judge Jigoku's cabin. However, we can be sure that, contrary to the witness's claim, the guard wasn't there at all times. What? I have here a notice of a particular event that was scheduled to take place aboard the steamship on the 31st. Where did you get that? Very observant. So many things we've surprised him with. It's evidence gathered by Mr. Herlock Sholmes. You were acquainted yesterday, if you remember. Herlock Sholmes again. According to this itinerary, after leaving the port of Dunkirk at exactly 10 p.m., and for a period of 20 minutes, all crewmen of the SS Grouse were to gather on deck for an evacuation drill. All crewmen were away from their posts? And during that 20-minute interval, of course, any gunshots emanating from your cabin would have been heard by no one. In summary, Judge Jigoku, you had ample opportunity to commit the crime.
Objection!
A 20-minute window of opportunity. That's an excellent find, Ryunosuke, but it amounts to nothing. Why? Because the witness clearly stated in his testimony that no incident occurred in his cabin. Unless you have some decisive evidence that can show his testimony to be false, your accusation is nothing more than conjecture. Very true. Well, counsel. Inspector Gregson was killed in Judge Jigoku's cabin that night. I'm certain of it. Because the defense has the evidence to prove it. We'll present the evidence for the defense at once, counsel. What proof do you have that the victim's life was taken in Jigoku's cabin? This one.
Take that!
Judge Jigoku, this was found in your cabin yesterday. What is that? The crown of a pocket watch. A pocket watch? And if you will observe, the victim's pocket watch, which we know he treasured, is missing precisely that part. It can't be. Moreover, this crown is a perfect fit on the spindle protruding from the victim's watch. Now, the fact that this was retrieved from Judge Jigoku's cabin tells us that the victim's watch almost certainly broke there. In other words, the victim was killed on the 31st during the 20-minute evacuation drill. in the cabin occupied by you, Judge Jigoku. Well, you're razor sharp, aren't you, you young murderer? I was acquitted of that.
Objection!
Expertly maneuvered, Ryunosuke. But... And your argument sounds entirely plausible, at first. But rather like this pocket watch, it's full of cracks. And I believe Judge Jigoku feels the same way. I was wrong to acquit you earlier in the year. Sorry? If I'd known that it would result in anyone having to listen to this drivel, I would have declared you guilty just to spare the world your ridiculous bombast. I think it's clear that the witness will have to give further testimony. When you hear what actually happened in my cabin that night, you'll notice the pitfall into which you've stumbled. Prior to your renewed testimony, I would like to clarify one point. The fact that this part of the victim's watch was discovered in your cabin means that you acknowledge he was there, I presume. Yes, I do. Very well, then. You may proceed to give your formal testimony about what exactly happened in your cabin aboard the ship on the evening of the 31st of October. Of course, as a man of the law, I have no intention of obstructing justice. I had a guest waiting for me when I returned to my cabin after finishing my evening meal in the dining room. When I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there, foolishly waving a gun at me. I soon took care of him with an ippon seo throw. Seoi throw. God, I hate when they put vowels like that together. He couldn't wait to run away after that. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. It was nothing to do with his murder. How did it wind up inside your trunk? The inspector was clearly killed having returned to Britain because his body was found in London. A common jujutsu martial art technique in my country. I was careful not to use too much force, but the man obviously landed too heavily for his watch to take. So, Ryunosuke Naruhodo, I imagine you can see the flaw in your logic now, can't you? Ani? The fact that the pocket watch was broken in the witness's cabin is no way proves that the victim's murder took place there. I've no doubt the inspector intended to kill me, but he didn't manage to pull the trigger. Yes, because he was merely the tactician, not the Reaper's hand of death. Well, the testimony appears to make perfect sense so far as I can tell, ignoring the fact that there's a bullet hole and a chip of the sword in the damned case, and the fact that the pocket watch part got inside this guy's freaking chest, but sure. Let me express my deep gratitude for your understanding, my lord. But if this testimony holds, Judge Jigoku will be deemed to have no involvement in the case. Well, counsel, I really see no reason for wasting precious court time here on a cross-examination. Sorry, my lord, the defense has a right to a cross-examine, and I don't intend to squander that. You're an embarrassment to your countrymen, not knowing when you're beaten. In that case, proceed, Mr. Naruhodo. A guest waiting for me in the... Because the so-called guard posted at your cabin door had just let your killer pass, you mean? Apparently, Gregson told the crewman he was a police inspector, which was the truth, of course. He wouldn't have had his identification with him, though. He had his trench coat and mustache, not to mention the bag of chips. I imagine the crewman was convinced. Huh? But the man accompanying him would have had 2 swords slung around his waist. You mean me? Would he have had... Would he have had 2 swords? So this happened very recently then. Because we gave him back his sword in chapter 3? Or was that chapter 4? I can't remember. This story's all over the place. Who else? Yes, that's true. You would have hoped the sight of a few swords might have set off alarm bells in the guard's head. Point is, I left the cabin before its occupant returned, and I immediately disembarked the ship. Certainly, all I can tell you is that only the inspector was waiting for me when I arrived back at my cabin. You entered without an inkling of his suspicion. That's right, none whatsoever. I walked through the door, a mustachioed Englishman was there.
Hold it!
Obviously you're talking about Inspector Gregson. Yes, though at the time I didn't know the man's name. And there was no time for introductions. I value my life over manners. By which you mean that the inspector was there to assassinate you, I suppose. That was certainly the impression given by the gun pointing in my direction. But I've never seen the muzzle of a revolver shake about so much in all my life. Anyone would think the man had never shot somebody before. Believe it or not, most of us haven't. Anyway, there was no time to call for the help of the crewman at the door, so I dealt with the man myself. Took care of him. He didn't run away. Even though the man had a gun. That was a very brave move, wasn't it? My Iponseo Savoy was far faster than a bullet, I can assure you. I doubt this. But surely all that commotion caused the crewman to come in, didn't it? Yes, of course. He burst in immediately without knocking. The inspector hurled himself at the stocky fellow and just managed to slip past him to make his escape. The outstanding guard does it again. Luckily, there aren't many situations I can't get out of with a quick keep-on throw. I imagine his watch was broken when I threw him over my shoulder. The crown snapped off and the glass covering the face of the watch was cracked. Preferable to the man's head being pulled off or his spine cracking, wouldn't you say? Not that the man was spared for long, a bullet to the chest soon saw to that. But the point is, the broken pocket watch doesn't prove that a murder took place. Absolutely not. All the watch proves is the power of my jujitsu throw. Whatever you say, it doesn't quite ring true that no shot was fired in that cabin, because there was an obvious bullet hole in the wall. What are you talking about? That's what the star of your lowbrow detective stories told you, isn't it? Well, I don't care for such fiction. Haven't you worked it out yet, you little stripling? No murder took place in my cabin. The inspector was clearly killed, having returned to Britain.
Hold it!
But there's no evidence that proves the victim ever returned to London alive. Just take a moment to think that idea of yours through now, stripling. If the inspector was killed on the steamship in France, how on earth could he have got back to Britain? We did learn that they had refrigeration on board the ship. When people die, their bodies remain at that same spot. It's a devil of a thing. Well, then obviously the culprit must have moved the body. How, exactly? Carrying a corpse off a ship in your arms would raise a few eyebrows at least, don't you think? Obviously his body was in the chest. It was in the trunk. Well, yes, that's true, but... All passenger luggage is inspected when it's unloaded from arriving vessels. Really? They open every goddamn one? Are you serious? I doubt that, especially in this time period. And I would like to think the border police would query the corpse of an English gentleman as hand luggage. The murder had taken place aboard the ship. You wouldn't imagine the body would have been disposed of at sea. There would be no sense in risking being caught by attempting to transport the body back to Britain. Let's kill that idea, then. But perhaps not. Mr. Sato? We've heard that the first-class passengers were under constant scrutiny by the crewmen posted to guard them, which would mean that the culprit had no opportunity to dispose of the body in the sea. Yes, that's true. But transporting the body to Britain may have been the only viable alternative. Dear me, you really are new to this, aren't you? We've only been at it for like 6 months, whatever. I thought I'd been perfectly clear, but it seems I'm going to have to explain it in words you can understand. I think I ought to alter my testimony with your consent, of course, my lord. I have no objection. State your amended testimony now. There's no possible way I could have transported the victim's corpse back to Britain.
Hold it!
Oh, there's an idea. Think about it, stripling. All passengers and crew disembarked at the same time and passed through the same checks at the border. The symposium guests were then driven straight to the hotel in carriages organized by the ministry. And we met you as soon as you arrived at the hotel. So you did. Well then, remind me, did I have a corpse over my shoulder at the time? Nobody had a big goddamn trunk with him. No, of course not. So we're in agreement then. I couldn't possibly have brought the inspector's body back to Britain. Unless, of course, they've developed some clever device these days to instantly move things from A to B. I'm sure he would have also had diplomatic immunity that could have prevented any check on his luggage. Funny you should say that. Professor Harebrain's invention didn't actually work, if you remember, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, of course. The defense has become unusually quiet, I notice. Yes, because there's really nothing more to say. So that's his story. Well, I suppose if you think about it, whenever you drop a teacup in the office and it breaks, we don't say, Mr. Naruhodo must have been murdered there, do we? Is that a veiled threat about what might happen to me if I break another one? And the fact is that Inspector Gregson's body was found in the little room on Fresno Street. If he really was killed in Judge Jigoku's cabin, the body would have been moved somehow, obviously. So are we suggesting then that he was knocked out, thrown into the trunk, brought back to Britain in the room, and then murdered in the room? Transporting a dead body over a country border. That would be impossible for the majority of people. For the majority of people. Not for people with diplomatic immunity. So there must have been some special circumstances that made it possible for the culprit then. That could be a vital realization, I think, Mr. Naruhodo. Alright. There's no possible way, huh?
Objection!
There's no possible way you could have moved Inspector Gregson's body, you say. I would say the opposite is true. And what's that supposed to mean? Far from being impossible for you to do, the transporting of Inspector Gregson's body back to Britain is something only you could do. What are you talking about, Ryunosuke? As well as being a judge, Mr. Jigoku is also Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, which means he's exempt from having his luggage searched when he enters the country. We learnt that when we first met you upon your arrival in London. Well, all those passport checks and luggage searches at the border took rather a long time. I must say I'm very envious of your ministerial status. You didn't have to go through any of that, did you? I knew you were jealous. That's one hell of a thing to remember. I presume you recall this, Judge Shigoku. It's a photograph we took in the foyer of the hotel to mark the occasion. As the court will note, you have with you your large travel trunk. Large enough, in fact, to have a corpse inside. Mr. Naruhodo, surely you're not suggesting... I'm afraid I am, yes. 3 days ago, when we were chatting innocently with the new arrivals from Japan in the hotel, the body of Inspector Gregson was just meters away from us, inside Judge Jigoku's trunk. Order in the courtroom. I'm skeptical, counsel, that a grown man's body could fit inside even the largest travel trunk. It could. Because I happen to know that the witness himself, a man of considerable size, fits inside his trunk. And verifying that would be extremely simple, wouldn't it, Judge Jigoku? But inside his trunk, how horrifying. And after we'd spoken with you at the Great Waterloo Hotel, you had the opportunity to visit the apparent scene on Fresno Street, taking your trunk with you in a cab to deposit the inspector's body. I don't have to listen to this nonsense. Dr. Gorey, the coroner who examined the body, has confirmed the possibility. She has acknowledged there are signs that steps may have been taken to disguise the true time of death. The onset of the body's decomposition could have been delayed by storing it in a refrigerator. Counsel, as I remember explaining yesterday, refrigerators of the requisite size are few and far between. Yes, I'm sure they are, but one place they're certainly found is on large ocean liners. Such ships are equipped with electrically refrigerated cold rooms to keep food fresh on their long sea voyages, and the SS Grouse is no exception. Professor Mikotoba told me about it only yesterday. Well, Judge Jigoku. However much you prolong this debate, you can't eliminate the truth. All the evidence points to you being the killer. Well, this is all very heartening. I can see that it was a wise move letting Asogi and you embark on this study tour. You're talking about now. Logical reasoning, of course. All court proceedings will be built on logical reasoning in a new century. And I can see that you've both laid firm foundations for that already. Judge Jigoku, please stop diverting attention from the issue at hand. The defense has made an accusation against you. How do you respond? Respond? There's really no need for me to respond, is there? Why ever not? Because before you can even begin to answer the question of when the victim was killed, you must first establish one key fact. Where was the victim killed? It's quite logical. The actual scene of the crime. Prosecution's stance is unaltered. Killing took place on Fresno Street when the gunshot was heard. As the accused, Barak Van-Zeek shot the victim at point-blank range. Since no tangible evidence exists to disprove the prosecution's claim at this time, the defense's deductions amount to little more than an elaborate fairy tale. I'm afraid that's how the logical reasoning... What? I don't think there's supposed to be another "the" in there. That's how the logical reasoning British are known for... What? I'm afraid that's how the logical reasoning the British are known for really works. Jesus Christ, what an awkward sentence. I feel like there should have been punctuation in there. The victim was shot in that little room on Fresno Street and died instantly? I'm afraid it's the prosecution's claim that's the only fairy tale here. How can you say that? Quite simply, because that claim directly contradicts a certain piece of evidence in our possession. Very tantalizing, counsel. I think you had better explain yourself to the court, don't you? The prosecution claims that Inspector Gregson died instantly when he was shot at the scene on Fresno Street. But this evidence clearly contradicts that claim. His body appears to be tightly curled up, and there's a red hairpiece.
Take that!
A photograph of the victim in the very location you claim he wasn't killed. Yes, but the point is the posture of the body itself. If Inspector Gregson had been shot there in that room, it's out of the question that his body would have been curled up in a ball like that. I mean, really? I'm sorry to disappoint you, but your logic is flawed. He could easily have adopted the fetal position due to the pain of the shot, which subsequently proved fatal. I'm sorry to disappoint you, Judge Jigoku, but it's your logic that is flawed. What? According to this autopsy report, the victim died instantly. He would have felt no pain, much less have been able to draw himself into that position. Which begs the question of why the victim's body is curled up in that way. Though the answer should be abundantly clear by now. The only problem with this is where the hell did all the blood come from? You're suggesting the inspector's body took on that posture ahead of its arrival on Fresno Street, before it was coldly turned out on the floor from the inside of a large travel trunk. You're quite right. The shape of the body, it looks exactly as if it had been kept in a confined space. Excuse me. Judge Jigoku, present your trunk for examination. Oh yes, I just happened to drag it to court with me. I believe it's very possible that it will contain traces of the victim's blood. Actually, it did, didn't it? We saw something that had blood in it. Present my trunk. I refuse. What? On what grounds? The Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Empire of Japan. I'm the Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Empire of Japan. I shouldn't have to put up with this treatment just because of some stripling's baseless accusations. In other words, Judge Jigoku, there is blood in your trunk. I decline to answer that. As the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I have privileges that allow me to... At this moment, you're not a government minister. You are a witness in a trial in Britain's highest court. I don't care who you are or what your status outside this courtroom might be, you will not withhold information. Nothing is more important than the truth. Order. Order in court. Well, Mr. Jigoku, what's it to be? You can't be serious. You did it? Have you no shame at all, Kazuma Asogi? What? Very well, I admit it. I did bring the inspector's body into the country. Inside my trunk, exactly as postulated by the defense. Dear God, outrageous. So it was you. No, I admit to nothing more than what I've said. Of killing the man, I certainly have no recollection. What on earth is that cryptic statement supposed to mean? I merely disposed of the inspector's body, which was left in my cabin, in order to avoid unwanted attention. As the judicial assistant over there pointed out, I had no chance to throw it into the ocean. So, I decided my only option was to bring it into Britain with me and dispose of it somewhere else. You can't still deny it. If you didn't do it, then who on earth did kill the man? As you know, there was one other person in my cabin that night. He had the opportunity. And moreover, he'd already accepted a mission to take the inspector's life. Oh. That's right. Who else could it have been? It was you, Kazuma Asogi. I never thought you'd stoop to this, Seishiro Jigoku. You've taken the words straight out of my mouth, Prosecutor Kazuma Asogi. You thought by leaving the body in my cabin you could pin the crime on me, did you? Well, the prosecution counsel has already admitted to visiting the witness's cabin on the night in question. Yes, on an assassination mission, no less. You wouldn't. So, what do you make of that, young stripling? You've heard my testimony now, and that's all I have to say on the matter. I'll admit to nothing more. I don't believe this. Counsel for the defense. What is your position now? The court awaits your response to the witness's assertion. The assertion that on the night in question, the victim's assailant was in fact Mr. Kazuma Asogi. This isn't the dead end it seems to be. The answer's right in front of me. It comes down to Jigoku or Kazuma. Both of them had the opportunity to kill Gregson, but only one of them did it. And I'm just a step away from proving who. Very well. The defense is ready to respond to the assertion put forward by Judge Jigoku. The idea that the victim's murder could have been committed by Prosecutor Asogi is... Can we pull on this? We can. A charming little rabbity version of Mr. Sholmes. Do you suppose this is how Iris sees him? Are you alright, Mr. Naruhodo? Your eyes are veritably boring into the poor doll's ears. Oh, sorry, I was just wondering. What do you suppose would happen if I were to tug at its ears with all my might right now? I'm sure we'll find out when the time is right. To become a proper gentleman, you really must learn stoic patience. But I want to know. Especially since we've already done it before. May 31st. Doesn't say what year. It's maddeningly unhelpful that it does this. I looked at that. So we determined that this was caused by a firecracker blowing the other candles out, you know. I honestly don't know how you're supposed to figure this one out. Also, oh, there he is. I was gonna say, Kazuma's not in here. Well, shit, this one's going on for a long time. It's impossible. Judge Shigoku, let me remind you of something you said only a few minutes ago. You claim that logical reasoning is the future of the judicial process. It is, no question. Well, logical reasoning can prove something here. Namely, that it would have been impossible for Prosecutor Osogi to commit the crime. What? Court will only accept an argument that is supported by compelling evidence, so present what you have, counsel. What proof is there that allegedly demonstrates the impossibility of Prosecutor Osogi's involvement?
Take that!
It's itinerary for crew members of the SS Grouse, my lord. This is conclusive proof. An itinerary. How does that prove anything? Judge Jigoku, the moment you acknowledged that you found the victim's body in your cabin, this itinerary suddenly became much more significant. What? Why? On the night in question, as always, a crewman sentry was on guard outside your cabin door. As long as he was there, nobody could have fired a shot inside the cabin. Absolutely, because it's inconceivable that the guard wouldn't have heard it and come to investigate. So that tells us that the crime must have taken place when the guard was elsewhere. And that narrows it down to 20 minutes just after 10 o'clock, as indicated on the itinerary. Yes, I see no flaw in your reasoning so far. But the crucial point is this. When the evacuation drill took place, the steamship had already put to sea from the port of Dunkirk. Now, clearly the murder could only have been committed by someone who was aboard the vessel at the time. But Prosecutor Osogi stated in yesterday's proceedings, I didn't come to Great Britain to take anyone's life, so I left Gregson and disembarked the ship. I spent that night at a boarding house in the town and returned to England the following morning. Which I'm sure the court will agree is conclusive proof. Kazuma Osogi couldn't possibly have carried out the killing. No, absolutely not. I don't accept that at all. What do you mean? The boy's just saying that to exonerate himself. We can't trust that he really disembarked the vessel. Obviously, after he left my cabin, he hid himself somewhere nearby on the ship. Just waiting for his chance to come back and finish the... No, that's out of the question. Isn't it, Kazuma? As the defense rightly recalls, I disembarked the vessel and spent the night in a boarding house in Dunkirk. And as I said yesterday, I signed my name in the accommodations register book. An extremely easy to verify and undeniable proof. There's no escape this time. You can forget that you're a judge or a government minister. It's time you gave the court an honest answer, as a common man. You killed Inspector Tobias Gregson and transported his corpse back to Britain. Then you dumped the body in the room on Fresno Street and made it look as if the murder had happened there. That's what really happened, isn't it, Seishiro Jigoku? It was that damned trial 10 years ago. That's when all this began. Looking back now, my fate was decided that day. I was doomed already. Didn't he get in trouble the last time he was here for doing the same thing? It's over. My life is over. British assassin to eliminate a professor in Japan, a Japanese assassin to eliminate a detective in Britain. Both assassins will use diplomatic immunity to evade conviction and return safely to their homelands. The assassin exchange request arrived from Britain about 1 year ago. Though it was hardly a request, it was a demand. And for that, you decided to recruit Mr. Asogi. But things didn't go according to plan. Your chosen assassin never made it to Britain. You found yourself unable to dispatch a replacement, because I was already on my way to Britain at that time, in Cosmo's place. And that left me with only one option for carrying out my obligation: to eliminate the mark myself, personally. Of course, there was but a single opportunity for me to do that. The International Forensic Science Symposium, I presume. That's right. I decided it would be safest to carry out the plan before my arrival in Britain, so I enlisted the help of my British counterpart, and made arrangements for a pretext that would take the inspector to Dunkirk. To lure the man in, he was given a sham mission by the Reaper. What? Reaper? But there's only one person who could have done that. The mastermind of the entire operation. The Reaper himself. So, that means that the assassin exchange was all planned by the Reaper. I'm not at liberty to say anything about my British counterpart. Anyway, the inspector accepted the Reaper's mission and dutifully infiltrated my cabin on the steamship. But it was all a trap designed to lead him to France and his own death. How awful. It was past 9 o'clock when I returned to my cabin from the dining hall that evening. I didn't give him time to attack me. I choked him until he lost consciousness. But there was a guard just outside the door, so I left it at that for the time being. Even the slightest noise might have aroused suspicion, so I bided my time, waiting. For the 20 minutes after 10 o'clock, I had intended to finish him by strangulation, but moments before I had the chance, he suddenly came around and went for me in a reckless move. I'd received the British-issue gun 16 years earlier, being a member of the judiciary as a visiting student. I never imagined I'd have to use it for something like that. So the revolver belongs to you, does it? Then the victim was killed inside your cabin on the SS Grouse, which begs the question of why you arranged for his body to be discovered in the room on Fresno Street. The young judicial assistant over there has already answered that question. There was no way I could take the body up on deck to throw it over the side. That's precisely where all the crewmen were gathered for the evacuation drill. So before the first-class cabin sentries returned, I took the corpse to the refrigeration room. Then on arriving in Dover, you concealed the body in your trunk in order to smuggle it past the border police. I knew I needed to take the steps if the police were to be convinced when the body was found in London. In that case, you must have known. Must have had intimate details of Inspector Gregson's intended schedule. Yes, my British counterpart sent me everything I needed to know. The inspector was due at Fresno Street at 5 o'clock that afternoon, in order to meet a man by the name of Hugh Boone, from whom he would take back his police identification. I decided that man would be the perfect person to set up as a culprit, so I took a hackney carriage over there with the body still in my trunk. It must have been just after we took this photograph with you at the hotel then. Yes, I wasn't expecting a welcoming committee. I was more than a little nervous. On Fresno Street, I spotted a young girl selling little firecrackers. Miss Venus, of course. I conceived of the candle trick there and then. So I donned a simple disguise and approached the girl to buy enough firecrackers to replicate a gunshot. Sort of disguise. For some reason, the inspector had a bright red hairpiece in his own traveling case, so I put that on, although I suspect I drew more attention to myself in that than I would have otherwise. The hairpiece we found at the scene, the inspector had it ready for the Red-Headed League investigation. I only arrived at the room at around 4:45. So I quickly placed the body on the floor, moved the notice board, and set up my little candle trick. I arranged it so the firecrackers would go off with a bang around 15 minutes later, so that Mr. Boone, who was due to arrive at 5, would walk straight into a trap. Except, at the last moment, I made a careless blunder. What was that? I imagine it was the bag of fish and chips. I didn't notice that it had fallen out of his overcoat pocket when I moved the body to the refrigeration room. I put it back into his pocket the following morning, but, well, it seems the warmth of the heated cabin had accelerated the decay of the fish. Anyway, that's everything. All the sordid details of what I did. Who would have guessed that a man whose last name is Hell would have done something bad? I've heard enough. We've arrived at the truth about the murder of one of the country's most capable and respected police inspectors. The witness will be tried in the coming days. For a crime of such a vile nature, you can expect the most severe penalty. Given that he's got diplomatic status, I mean, really? An exchange of assassins, what a foolhardy idea. Mr. Jigoku, one last detail. Who was your counterpart in Britain? Who was the mastermind behind the assassin exchange? Nothing you say now can make matters any worse for you. Just tell us. Enough. I've already told you that I cannot say. Even though as things stand, you may very well never set foot in your homeland again. What are you waiting for? Can't we get this over with now? It's finished, all of it. I'm finished. Then, in the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I now pronounce the findings of this court. This man before us has admitted to the willful murder of Tobias Gregson. Seishiro Jigoku, it is the opinion of this court that you should be found guilty. But he wasn't on trial. And may I remind those present of the strict confidentiality demanded by this closed court. Moments ago, Mr. Jigoku signed a written confession, admitting to the murder of Inspector Gregson and the subsequent conveyance of the body. In short, the defendant's innocence has therefore been established beyond doubt. Oh, wonderful. Well done, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, thank you. Is something wrong? I'm just a little troubled by his silence. The true identity of the Reaper of the Bailey and this extraordinary assassin exchange. We do remain in the dark about these mysteries, however. Insofar as the indictment brought against the defendant in this trial, we have reached a conclusion. I have every intention of pursuing both mysteries. As a prosecutor. As you wish. Now, for the formal adjudication. I hereby declare the defendant, Beric Van Zieks.
Objection!
This has gone on for nearly an hour and a half. We don't have time for this, Cosmo. The prosecution calls for adjudication to be deferred. Counsel. The accused's innocence hasn't been fully established at all, and therefore it would be wrong to deliver a verdict at this time. That is the prosecution's unwavering position. What? But Judge Jigoku's already confessed. Nevertheless, he confessed to killing Gregson. He didn't confess to being the Reaper, right? Eric Van Zieks has committed crimes for which he must be punished. Okay, but is that what the... I even forget what the point of the trial was. What is the point of this trial? Why is he on trial? It's because he was assumed to be the murderer, right? So anything else has to be in its own trial. What the fuck, man? I mean, to be fair, everybody here has only studied like a month worth of British law, so who knows? But what do I know, right? Oh. It would appear you have information that the court needs to hear, Prosecutor Asogi. Certainly, the murder of Inspector Gregson was actually carried out by Seishiro Jigoku, but it's clear from the witness's testimony that he was coerced into complying with the plot, into this sick, merciless assassin exchange. That may be true, but... So what I want to know is, who coerced Jigoku? Who was pulling the strings? The victim went to France having been ordered on a mission for the Reaper, only to be murdered. In other words, the mastermind behind the assassin exchange is someone in a position to give such an order. As we've already established, the Reaper himself. Well, certainly that would appear to follow. The prosecution hereby formally accuses the man in the dock, Eric Van Zieks, of being the Reaper of the Bailey, and furthermore, I'm going to prove his guilt beyond all reasonable doubt. What? It's very obviously Strongheart, though. Order. Order! The Reaper of the Bailey is a long-standing mystery, Counsel. Are you suggesting you have some new information with which to build a case? Scotland Yard has already investigated Lord Van Zieks very thoroughly in that regard, and they found no evidence whatsoever to substantiate the claim that he is the Reaper. Perhaps. Circumstances have now changed. What do you mean? It's already been established that the assassin exchange was negotiated with Jigoku by the Reaper himself, which means we now have a new line of questioning by which to identify definitively the man's identity. That is the prosecution's intention here. I must say I'm surprised by quite how tenaciously you appear to want to besmirch my name. You are guilty of an unforgivable crime, Lord Van Zieks. And I will bring you to justice for it, whatever it takes. That explains Cosma's silence before. I'll stop at nothing to finish what Lord Van Zieks unwittingly started 10 years ago. Very well, whilst it's extremely irregular. I will, on this occasion, grant the prosecution further opportunity for witness testimony. The defendant will disclose any and all involvement he has had with the Reaper in the assassin exchange. I thank you, my lord, for guiding the court so wisely, and completely disregarding any assumption of British law. I hereby declare this court to be in session for a supplementary hearing. I mean, I guess this is the final boss round, right? It makes sense that we would have the second form. So why not? Pray turn a blind eye to the discourtesy as I verify that this vile and unremitting accusation hasn't soured the contents of my hallowed chalice. I don't believe he's ever had a drink of any of that. Lord Van Zieks? I first had to suffer the pseudonym of the Reaper 10 years ago now, and ever since that time I've endured the weight of implied guilt that's gone with it. So I welcome the chance to testify now, and crush those allegations once and for all. Good. Then let justice decide, Lord Van Zieks. The prosecution seeks to begin building its case by calling the accused to the stand as the primary witness, in order that he may answer the accusation brought by the prosecution that he is the Reaper of the Bailey. And what says the defense? Putting the defendant in the witness stand can be extremely dangerous, and Kazuma-sama is so emotional at the moment, he's not thinking logically. You're right, that he's not himself. But I knew it would be like this, and I came here today determined to face him through whatever may arise, as a lawyer and as his friend. And that's what we must do. The defense has no objection, my lord. Very well. Defendant, you will take the witness stand. give formal testimony on the subject of your involvement with the Reaper and the assassin exchange. As you wish, my lord. Criminy. Okay, we'll end this one here. I'll see you next time.